Title: A Matter of Respect at the Oak Room. They asked her to leave without an explanation, but Karoline wasn't about to let that slide. It had started like any ordinary day for Karoline. After a long morning filled with meetings and back-to-back events, she sought refuge at her usual corner booth in the Oak Room, a local bistro that had become her sanctuary over the years. This wasn't just any restaurant. It was a place where every detail spoke of familiarity and comfort. The waiters greeted her by name, and the manager would often stop by with a friendly inquiry about her day. It was a haven where she could unwind away from the clamor of her busy life. That afternoon, the Oak Room was as lively as ever. The aroma of freshly baked bread mingled with the soft clinking of glasses and the hum of quiet conversations. Karoline had chosen her favorite table by the window, the one with the best view of the street. From there, she could observe the pulse of the neighborhood. Construction projects, new businesses popping up, and even the occasional parade down Main Street. As she scanned the menu and sipped her water, her mind still buzzed with thoughts from the hectic morning. Today, however, an unfamiliar presence disrupted the comforting rhythm of her routine. While Karoline was lost in the anticipation of a peaceful meal, she noticed a new face among the staff. A tall, middle-aged man with a clean-shaven face and an impeccably tailored suit. She hadn't seen him before, but in a place where new hires were not uncommon, it didn't immediately raise alarm. Yet, something about his demeanor set him apart from the warm, familiar faces she was used to. When a usual waiter came to take her order, Karoline confidently requested her favorite dish, grilled salmon with a side of roasted vegetables. A smile briefly crossed her face as she anticipated the comforting flavors and the gentle buzz of friendly conversation. But before the waiter could retreat, the new man stepped directly over to her table. His voice, low and firm, broke the familiar cadence of the Oak Room. "Excuse me," he said abruptly. "I'm sorry, but I'm going to have to ask you to leave." For a moment, Karoline blinked in confusion. "Pardon me?" she asked, leaning forward slightly as if to confirm she hadn't misheard him. The man repeated his demand in an even more insistent tone, his posture rigid, as though he were waiting for her to argue, to cause a scene. But Karoline was no stranger to discomfort. She had faced many challenging situations before. Yet, something about this felt different, off, as though an invisible force was at work. Scanning the room, Karoline noticed that the other diners were watching her with curious, guarded glances. There was no outburst or angry confrontation from anyone else, just a heavy, expectant silence. Despite the prickling confusion and a racing heart, Karoline maintained her composure. "Can you tell me why?" she asked in a steady, polite voice that belied her quickening pulse. "I've been coming here for years, and I don't understand why I'm being asked to leave." The man paused, his eyes dark and unyielding, his hands clasped tightly in front of him. "I don't need to explain," he replied curtly. Yet Karoline wasn't convinced. "Actually, I think you do," she countered. "If you're going to ask me to leave, I deserve an explanation, just as any other customer would." At that moment, Karoline's gaze drifted around the restaurant. She noticed that the manager was standing near the kitchen door, watching the exchange. In the past, the manager had always been a friendly figure, casually mingling with guests and ensuring everyone felt welcome. Today, however, he remained silent and motionless, a fact that deepened the mystery of the situation. Her mind raced. Had something changed? Was there a complaint about her behavior? The thought was utterly foreign. Karoline had always prided herself on being respectful, friendly, and a model customer. Yet here she was, being singled out without any clear reason. Frustration began to well up inside her, but she restrained it. This wasn't the time for a loud confrontation. It was a moment for calm, reasoned insistence. "I'm sorry," she said softly, "but I really do need to know why I'm being asked to leave. I'm here to enjoy my meal, and I haven't disturbed anyone." Her tone was polite yet firm, her eyes never leaving the man's. The new staff member's jaw clenched, and his eyes flickered briefly toward the manager, who now appeared to be reluctantly approaching the table. Finally, the manager arrived, a man whose face, usually open and warm, now wore an expression of conflicted hesitation. "I'm sorry, ma'am," he began, his voice carefully neutral, "but we've received a complaint about you." "A complaint about me?" Karoline repeated, utterly taken aback. She could hardly believe her ears. "I've been coming here for years. I've never been treated this way. What exactly is the complaint?" The manager hesitated, glancing uneasily at the man by her side. "I'm afraid I can't disclose that information," he said, his voice trailing off. Karoline felt a surge of disbelief. "You're telling me you're asking me to leave based on a complaint I don't even know about?" she said, her tone rising slightly with incredulity. "I deserve to know what I supposedly did wrong." For a long, heavy moment, silence reigned over the table. The new man beside her looked down, his posture rigid as if bracing for her reaction. Then, almost as an afterthought, he murmured, "You're disturbing the other customers." The words, weak and unconvincing, barely registered with Karoline. "Disturbing?" she echoed, incredulity lacing her voice. "I'm here for a meal, just as I've always been. There's no commotion, no uproar, only polite conversations and quiet enjoyment." The manager shifted uncomfortably, his eyes darting between Karoline and the man standing by her side. It was then that Karoline sensed the real issue was emerging. This wasn't simply about a complaint or a random policy enforcement. There was something else, a decision made without her knowledge. Who made this decision? She demanded, her voice steady and authoritative. "I deserve to know who gave the order to ask me to leave." After a tense pause, the manager's gaze fell. "It came from the owner," he admitted in a low voice. The owner. That name sent a jolt through Karoline. The Oak Room had been her refuge for years, and she knew the owner, Joan, who had always been kind, attentive, and fair. "The owner?" Karoline repeated, her voice a mixture of shock and hurt. "I've known Joan for years. Why would she have concerns about me?" The manager avoided her gaze, his words faltering as he struggled with the revelation. I don't have all the details," he stammered. "I was simply told to handle it." Frustration and confusion swirled within Karoline. This was not just about a meal, it was about her reputation and dignity. "I'm not leaving until I understand why this is happening," she declared firmly. "If there's a complaint, I deserve an explanation, plain and simple." The tension in the room grew almost unbearable. Other diners, who had watched the scene unfold, exchanged uneasy glances. Some whispered softly to one another, others simply stared. Karoline, however, remained resolute. She had always prided herself on being calm in the face of adversity, and now she was determined to stand up for herself. "I've been a loyal customer here for 4 years," she said steadily. "If someone has an issue with me, I deserve to know what it is. I expect to be treated with respect." The manager's face reddened as he shifted his weight. "I'm really sorry," he said finally, "but I've been instructed to ask you to leave." Anger flared briefly in Karoline's eyes, but she quickly moderated it with a deep breath. "I don't think that's acceptable," she replied. "I'm not going to leave until I get a clear explanation. I deserve to know exactly what the complaint is." At that point, the silence in the Oak Room seemed to thicken. The air was heavy with anticipation as Karoline's words hung in the space between her and the manager. She could sense that something wasn't right. This wasn't a simple mix-up or a misunderstanding about her behavior. The manager hesitated again, his eyes flicking to the man beside her. That man, who had remained mostly silent until now, cleared his throat and spoke in a low, urgent tone. "It's not really about you, Karoline," he said, his expression troubled. "There's been some misunderstanding regarding your interactions with other guests." "Other guests?" Karoline repeated, her tone edged with disbelief. "I've always been friendly and respectful." I've never been told I made anyone uncomfortable. If someone had an issue, they should have said so directly. The manager's eyes shifted uneasily as he muttered, I'm just doing my job. I was told there was a complaint, and I have to handle it." Karoline's mind raced. This was more than just a complaint. It was a decision made without any proper explanation. "I deserve to know who made this complaint," she insisted. "If it's about my behavior, I need to hear exactly what was said." Finally, as if the mounting pressure had forced a crack in the facade, the manager's voice softened. I was told it came from the owner," he said again, barely above a whisper. The revelation stung. The owner, Joan, was someone Karoline had always trusted and admired. Why would Joan have concerns about her? The question echoed in her mind until, resolute, Karoline reached into her purse and pulled out her phone. "I'm going to call Joan," she declared. "I need to speak with her now." Taking a deep breath, she dialed the number. The phone rang twice before Joan's warm, familiar voice answered. "Karoline, it's been a while. How are you?" Karoline's tone was controlled but laced with urgency. "Joan, something's not right here. I've been asked to leave the Oak Room without any explanation. They say there's a complaint about me, something about how I interact with other customers. I don't understand. I've always been polite. I like to know what's going on." There was a pause on the other end. Karoline could almost hear the wheels turning as Joan processed the situation. "Oh, Karoline," Joan finally said, her voice heavy with regret. "I'm so sorry. I had no idea any complaint had been made about you. I value you as a loyal customer, and this is not how we conduct business at the Oak Room. I promise I'll look into this immediately and make it right." Relief and vindication mingled in Karoline's chest. "Thank you, Joan," she said softly. "I just want to be treated with the respect I deserve." After a few more heartfelt words, Joan assured her that the situation would be resolved and that she would personally speak with the manager. Karoline ended the call, feeling a surge of quiet satisfaction. Though the manager still looked uncomfortable, he now admitted, "I've spoken with Joan. She's very upset about what happened and has promised to fix it." Karoline nodded, but she wasn't ready to let the matter rest entirely. "I appreciate that," she said, her tone firm yet calm. "But this whole thing could have been avoided with proper communication. I'm a paying customer, and I deserve to know if there's an issue." The manager lowered his eyes and murmured another apology, and slowly, the tension in the room began to ease. Still, Karoline remained vigilant. This wasn't just about her treatment. It was about setting a precedent for respect and accountability. After a few moments of quiet conversation with the manager, the Oak Room resumed its usual gentle hum. The other customers, who had been watching with bated breath, gradually returned to their conversations. Karoline, however, lingered a few more minutes at her table, gathering her thoughts. The incident had shaken her, but had also reaffirmed her belief in standing up for herself. She had always believed that respect wasn't something to be taken for granted, and today she had made it clear that she wouldn't tolerate being treated otherwise. As she finally left the Oak Room, stepping out into the cool afternoon air, Karoline felt a mix of exhaustion and empowerment. The experience wasn't just about one misunderstanding. It was about the principle of being heard and treated fairly. Driving home later that day, the incident replayed in her mind. She thought about the puzzled looks of the manager, the silent discomfort of the man who had asked her to leave, and the supportive conversation with Joan. In that moment, she realized that her voice mattered. It wasn't enough to simply accept injustice quietly. Sometimes, one had to speak up and demand accountability, even if it meant challenging the established order. In the weeks that followed, the story of that afternoon at the Oak Room began to circulate among local patrons and even on social media. Loyal customers who had witnessed the confrontation started sharing their own stories of how the bistro had always been a welcoming haven. Others expressed admiration for Karoline's calm, yet assertive stance. Some even called for better communication policies to ensure that no customer would ever have to endure such an experience again. Karoline herself began to reflect on the deeper lesson of the day. It wasn't just about the food or the ambience of the Oak Room. It was about dignity, respect, and the power of a single voice standing up against arbitrary decisions. That afternoon had reminded her that loyalty and kindness should never be taken for granted. In every interaction, whether in a small bistro or a large institution, every individual deserved to be treated with the utmost respect. With time, the incident spurred changes at the Oak Room. The manager, having learned from his mistake, instituted clearer communication protocols and ensured that any customer complaints were handled with transparency. Joan, the owner, personally reached out to affected patrons, reaffirming her commitment to a welcoming atmosphere. And Karoline, though initially shaken, found herself more confident than ever. She realized that even in moments of unexpected adversity, her insistence on fairness and accountability could lead to positive change, not just for herself, but for everyone. One crisp morning, as she returned to her favorite table by the window, Karoline felt a subtle shift in the air. There's a new sense of camaraderie among the staff, and even the regular patrons, as if everyone had learned a valuable lesson about respect and open communication. The Oak Room, once a backdrop for an awkward confrontation, had transformed into a symbol of resilience and mutual respect. In the quiet moments of reflection during her meal, Karoline recalled that day with a mixture of regret and pride. Regret that such an incident had occurred at all, and pride that she had stood up for herself in a situation where many would have simply walked away. It was a reminder that sometimes the smallest act of demanding clarity could ripple out to create lasting change. She knew that every time she returned to that table, she wasn't just enjoying a meal. She was participating in a community that valued dignity and fairness above all. As the day drew to a close, Karoline left the Oak Room with a calm resolve. The events of that afternoon, though unsettling at the time, had sparked a deeper understanding within her that respect is not given, but earned, and that every customer has the right to demand it. In her heart, she knew that by simply standing her ground, she had contributed to a larger shift, one that might one day inspire others to speak up and insist on the courtesy they deserve. And so, as the golden light of the setting sun bathed the city streets, Karoline drove home with a quiet satisfaction. The incident at the Oak Room was now behind her, but its lesson would remain etched in her memory forever, a testament to the power of self-respect, clear communication, and the courage to insist on fairness in even the most unexpected of moments.